my limited palette in that little sewing tin. I finally refined it and decided to go with a cobalt teal, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, quinacridone rose, burnt umber, and this blue is from I'd say a kid set, and you'll see when I work with it, it's awful, but I included it in there because I can create really light skies with very little effort, and I want to finish it, quite frankly, so that I can put proper paint in there. And what I mean by proper paint, artist grade. These swatches were while I was testing which colors I'd like to include, and for interest's sake, let's just swatch out a few ones now. So this is the cobalt teal. And as many of you know, I like working with limited palettes. We can create a multitude of colors with just a few colors on our palettes. I'll mix some in with each other just now. You can have a look what we can do. Now, as you can see, I really have to work at loosening up that paint, and it's chalky, definitely not even student grade, I'd say kids grade. Alright, I'll get to mixing up some colors and then I'll swatch them out as well. Some cobalt teal, and let's start with the red, the cadmium red. Nice deep maroon. Okay, let's stick with the cobalt and then add some yellow. This is a really interesting palette. Cobalt teal again. And let's go with the quinacridone rose. You see, I love these secondary mixes. Sometimes use only them in a painting. Burnt umber with the cobalt teal. Divine. And then the last one with the cobalt teal is the fake blue. Now, just to show you how chalky it is, well, you can't really see it on camera, but it's almost milky. See there? It has like a milky residue. See what I mean? But anyway, I'm going to finish that and fill it up with proper paint. I think we've got a good collection here. Do you want me to make another mess? Let's do that. If you have puddles like that, just dry off your brush so that your brush becomes thirsty and soak it up. That way you don't have that edge on a drying puddle. I love that color play. Okay, so while those dry, let me tell you what I'm going to paint today. I had this as part of a class project this year, and as I was going through my things, I discovered that we didn't finish the project. So I'm going to finish it on camera so that the students can finish their projects as well. Because normally I demo the techniques to the students, and I also have a spare page where I explain what I want them to do. I've been asked why it doesn't have the large feathers on its head. So there, I drew them in now, and that way nobody has to ask me again. But as you can see, there's not enough room on this page. Now normally I'd have plenty of room around the page, especially if I'm doing a painting, because you need to put your painting inside a mat, and for that you need room. And when you put your mat around your image, you also need room on the bottom to add your name. Never cram a whole picture like this, edge to edge, on your page. Rather draw it smaller so you have it more centered in the middle. And then with this limited palette, because I'm using this palette now for a set amount of time, I'm trying to limit and eliminate most of the other colors. That means that I can't go and use the indigo now. Although the indigo is already in most of the shadow parts on the body, I'd still like to do that shadow areas throughout the whole bird and the leaves, because I wanted, my initial plan for the class was to have the whole background yellow and have the images like black and white. So let me get you a little bit closer and let's discover how we're going to mix that up, because obviously I still need to finish the leaves, and I have to mix that up with colors I have on my palette. When I have a look at this, let's see how I go. My first thought is the cobalt teal and burnt umber, but I've got a sneaky suspicion it's going to be a bit greenish. So how do we neutralize green? Well, we add red. All right. So we mixed up the cobalt teal and the burnt umber, and we get that. So I want it more toned down. So I'm just dividing that little puddle into two. Let me get it a little bit closer for you. Because the one I'd like to neutralize with the cadmium red, and the other one with the quinacridone rose. Let's see. Let's add a dash of yellow in there. And a dash of yellow in there. I think I'm going to go with that one. That would be cobalt teal and burnt umber. You can mix it half and half and see where you go. And just a drop of the cad red. This will give you a warmer shadow, maybe a bit darker by adding more of the cobalt teal. Yep, there we go. It's still going to be a warmer shadow, but that's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. What I am concerned about is finishing this piece and letting you follow along if you've taken this class with me before. Okay. So you see, it is possible with a limited palette to mix up as close as you can a color to fit in with your images. I want to continue on those leaves, and I'm going to do a wet and wet. So add water to your leaf shape and then take a little bit of color and charge it into that leaf shape. And I'll leave that first thin layer to dry. Let's go in wet on dry with this one and partially fill the leaf. Don't color it in. You can see the difference between the two. That one has full coverage and this one has partial coverage, because I want the leaves to look different. With the stem as well, try and focus the color on the shadow side. Because when we fill in our yellow just now, you'll see that white edge pop out. Let's do another wet and wet one here. I want some of them to be lighter and almost shadowy. I discovered this unfinished project in the drawer. The cat is in the studio again. See the variances on the leaves, and as that one's semi-dry now, it's a little bit damp but not dry, so I'm just going to add in a little bit of leaf detail, the veins, but not define it too much. Even smudge out some of that, and with a dry tissue paper blot some of it off, because I want these leaves to be suggestive and not draw too much attention. Our focus is on our beautiful birds, well, bird singular. As you can see, just here and there, a little bit of details. Maybe exaggerate the shadow side a little bit more. Be loose, you know. Don't try and fill in everything. We're not doing a coloring page. Just cleaned off the brush, dried off some of that wetness, and put a faint shadow on that leaf. Alright, so the crest of the cockatoo is there, and I think I want to darken up the eye a little bit around the ball of the eye, down the bottom and the front. Just a little bit. There, it looks good already. And then every here and there, I want to give the feathers a little more definition. So let me show you what I mean. If you have your feather drawing like this, and your other feathers are underneath there, and we added shadows in there, blended them out a little. I did a similar technique with the flowers last week, and just darken up that a little bit. If you want to give that feather a more defined look and carve out that feathery details, you simply need to add a little bit of darkness from where you had the dark first into the white. So that gives the feather a more defined look, and just wisping that little tip over your area where you want the detail will liven up that feather a little bit. So let's translate that back into our painting. For instance, let's focus on this area here. I need to mix up some more color. So if you tend to forget what mixes you made, I urge you to make your mixes, swatch them out, and then name them so that you know how you got there in the first place. It's so easy to forget, and then you look at that and you know, well, I did that, but I don't know how I did it. Write down your color recipes. They always come in handy. Alright. So there was a nice dark spot, and I'd like to give those feathers a little bit of definition. And I'll repeat some of that dark in the bottom. And instead of rinsing out my brush every time, I just use a separate brush and have it slightly wet and damp and feather that out. You can see I'm holding both brushes. So this one is the one with the paint, and this one is the one with the water. You'll learn how to figure out how to juggle these two once you've practiced your techniques some more. And you'll see the second brush, because it's not wet, it also gives you textured effects. So there I'm just adding another little shadow, and then on that feather, going in on the edge and dragging in those lines. And feathering out into the bottom feather again. So I don't want to do the whole bird. I want a few spots where that accent comes through. Because our eyes fill in the rest of the details, we don't have to force anything. The viewer's eyes will do the rest for us. People see what they want to see. I'm just reinforcing some of my pencil lines to create the illusion of detail. I don't mind my pencil lines showing. I did all the effort of drawing everything in, so why would I want to hide my pencil lines? The drawing for me is as beautiful as the painting. And some of your lines you can really smudge out a lot. And if you have a spot that's too prominent, just wet it a little bit. Take your towel and blot it out. It's already softer there, can you see? So maybe I need to soften that one as well. So while it's wet, maybe wet it a little bit more. And see, my two brushes are different, so I can remember color and water. Just soften up that edge a little bit, create those tiny little feathers underneath the chin and work them up into the white feathers under the eyes. There we go. The same with these. I just want to soften that transition and make smaller feather them out, so to speak. Right, let's get some yellow mixes up on our painting. I'm going to wipe this off because maybe not now. Let's use the lid to mix up some of the yellow. I'm going to use a slightly larger brush. I don't want to use that bright yellow as is. I'm going to tone it down a little bit, but I want to make sure I have enough. So for the top area, I'd like to have a real bright yellow, and then as we go downwards into the bottom, I'd like that yellow to stay yellow but be deeper. And how I imagine that to work is having my initial watery mix nice and saturated, and then adding a tiny drop of the burnt umber to tone it down slightly and get like a creamy yellow. Alright, I want to move the camera quickly, so bear with me. Might make you dizzy. Okay. There we go. Right. So we're going to start on the top and cut into the head feathers there. I'm not being particularly careful, but I want the feathers to stand out crisp and white for now, at least. Right, I'm just letting that wet edge come around, and by keeping the edge wet you can drop in more color and the color will flow. See those wet puddles on the edges? So in watercolor you can change colors mid paint. Okay, so the wet edge, see how nice and thick puddle it is? And all I'm doing now is taking that same two colors and gradually warming them up. And again into that same mix, just drop them in, drag it down and make sure it stays wet. Into that same puddle again, just warm it up and drag it in. Also like to vary the concentration of color over here, so we don't have the background just boring. So while that edge stays wet, you can go on and paint other areas and it won't make a line there as long as you're fast enough. So on the top of that branch you can see I left out the white edge, and on the shadow edge just filling in that color. And whatever color puddles up, I'll just soak up with my brush and use somewhere else. Maybe go a bit darker at the bottom. Remember to leave the white on top of the branches. So there is a mid-tone. So underneath that leaf there, I like to use that mid-tone again. So we have something that looks cohesive. Alright, get the last bit of color in there. You don't want to leave the exact same size white edge everywhere. That will be too predictable. On the shadow side, I actually touch the bottom. Right. We might have left this a little too long. That's alright. I'm just going to wet the area a little bit and add in some pure yellow. There we go. It doesn't show a line anymore. And I'm quite happy with the way our image turned out. So give that first layers that you do with your shadow side enough time to dry so that you can go in and add those little detail bits. And then don't be afraid of using your negative space to create some detail, like those highlight edges and little places of interest. And look how lovely that came out. The last thing I want to do is just use our shadow color to give those feathers on the head a little bit of detail like we did here. And those are thin, long strokes emerging from the previous ones we made. That's why I made them short, so that we can decide where we're going to add those longer feathers once we've come this far. That puddle there is a little bit wet. I don't want to risk going in there just yet. Adding a little bit of a shadow there and just blending it out. Making more feather shapes as we go along. And letting that wet and wet do what it needs to do. There we go. And the final little touch is wetting that cheek area, taking some yellow and giving our little cheek a yellow blush. And there we go. On the bottom of the bird, with a wet brush and a little thin mix of our shadow color, and then blend out with lots of water. It can make blooms. A lot of people don't like the blooms, but when you're creating texture with the blooms, it's exactly what you need. Can you see that whole section is wet? And the color was applied on the shadow edge. And I'm just going to leave that to dry and fill in my name. And there we have it. We're done. Basic and simple, yet striking, I think. Remember what I said about room around your image? So if I write my name there now, I won't be able to put a mat board around this. And that's okay, because lucky for me, I can do this digitally and then artificially add a rim around. So I'll see you for the next Meet Me in the Studio, or check out my YouTube channel, see what other videos you like. In the link below the video you can go to other areas on the net that I am at, like Instagram or Society 6, maybe Spoon Flower, and then I have other full-length classes on Skillshare. I'll leave some links down below for you to try out. Maybe you like having more classes, and we'll see you later. Bye.